All right, what's up, everybody? Sorry, I had to channel my inner Peter McKinnon. So, yeah, to get things started, to try to jump right into it. Groundspeak likes to roll out updates to websites, and larger ones they tend to announce in email newsletters. So, like significant changes or new features and whatnot, they'll let people know. But a lot of the little ones will many of them, most of them, will be included in forum posts that include release notes, kind of typical for software and whatnot. So recently, well, at least around the end of the year, they started rolling out updates. Primarily, you may have noticed the pop-ups for the privacy policy update, terms of use, that cookie, accept the cookies when they pop up. The one thing to remember, especially with the cookies, is not to be paranoid about all of these new things to accept. It's fairly standard, common web practice because, if you log into a website, that uses cookies to remember who you are. And so a lot of the time, these new laws that are being implemented require people to agree to the fact that these things are being stored on your personal browser. So if that pops up, you have the option to look in details and grab that information if you want to be sure, if you're not quite positive or uncertain of what might be happening. There's no big bad guy trying to track your every move. So that's just a minor thing that I wanted to get out of the way at first. There's been one of the fun things about these updates is because there are newsletters and then there's these forum posts with release notes. A lot of the times these updates don't get passed around. So you'll often find, especially in Facebook groups, somebody might share the news, but most often somebody will come along and post, why isn't this working? Why is this taking so long? And without a proper input, without feedback about why and how, things can erupt. And you get a whole lot of I don't want to say mob mentality, but a lot of people will come in and have a lot of opinions to share, and it can get kind of out of hand. So if you do ever get first-hand information about some of these updates, please do share from the source, because a lot of the time, misinformation, a lack of understanding, confusion can kind of muddy the waters. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to do a little bit here. Okay, volume is still pretty low. I will shift the microphone. Maybe that will help. Okay. Maybe I'll boost the volume just a tad. Oh, it is at max. Okay. Volume is at full. Maybe, yeah, that should be right. Okay. Anyway, so getting right up to, how's this? Is this volume good? I'm kind of shouting. I wonder if this is the microphone being used. Yeah, it is. Okay. Anyway, my volume is maxed. It is? Yes. Okay. So I will talk louder then. I don't know why the volume is lower. It used to be better. So just on the 14th, there was a kind of an undercover rollout that happened, a little update to the way that geocache listings are displayed. If you are aware of the fact that as an owner, you can add a background image. For instance, this is the big one. So geocache listings can have a custom background image. You can host it on your own website. You could upload an image to the photo gallery. And if you are savvy enough, you can grab the URL to direct link to the image and then paste that into the background image URL. Well, on Tuesday, they rolled out an update that they say is something that will make things easier for people who are less savvy to provide a custom background. And agreeably, yes, if you edit your cache details, your description, you now have the option to drag and drop or select an image to upload to the description, to the listing. The downside of that is they took away the custom URL. So switching gears a bit, if you remember fairly recently, we used to be able to have a related website, an external URL that was related to the geocache you're looking at. And that was kind of semi-announced, but it was removed, and websites or geocache listings that had a custom website URL became grandfathered. So if you were to edit that listing, you wouldn't be able to change that. No, the URL would be there. You could change it. But if you removed it and saved it, that field would never come back. So similarly now, only slightly different, if you edit a geocache listing, there is no more field to put in a custom URL. So I don't know if you're a cache owner, you've noticed that already, but I haven't seen it posted anywhere. It's been put into the forum, and there's a lot of discussion about that. But they have grandfathered existing listings that have a custom URL, custom background image, but you can't. If you save it, it'll keep it. But if you change it, if you upload an image, then you'll lose it. You have the option to delete it. Here, I'll show you. I have one of my geocaches set up, my listing here. And so if you see on this one, I have a background image just along the side there. And if you edit the listing, what we now have is this right down here, this little box here. So there is no more URL field to put in your custom. This image is actually hosted on my server. So what they're doing is for this particular, if you have a custom image, they just display a smaller thumbnail on this page. But if I were to click this delete button, then that effectively removes that value from the listing, and I will not be able to link my website, the website or the image that's hosted on my website. I would have to re-upload this image to the listing for it to stay there, for it to remain. So be careful. Now, the reason why this is important, this could be a spoiler, but it's kind of a tip, a little puzzling tip. A lot of people who put out puzzles have also hidden things in a background image. And sometimes it might be hidden in metadata in a JPEG header. So there could be things like GPS coordinates or date and time might be relevant, or location, that kind of stuff. That's all special information that's hidden within the image. So the problem with this is that on uploading the image, if you were to use this form and upload the image to here, it's now hosted on, they're using the Amazon Web Services, but they also strip all of the extra information, all of the EXIF data. So all these puzzles that have a background image, right now they're safe because the image is still located on a separate server. But if you were to upload it, you would be uploading it to their server, and they would be stripping the EXIF data, and you would lose all that. So that's something to be aware of. I don't know if you've noticed, but I don't think it has been announced either, but gallery images are under the same sanitization process, they call it. If you were to upload now images to a gallery, say with your find log or something, it will strip off EXIF data, so there's no hidden location information, because a lot of people tend to do that and forget that they have taken a picture at the cache location and the GPS information is in the picture. And that's kind of a giveaway. If you know what to do, you could pull that information out. So they're stripping all of that information off of all of their image uploads to their servers. Now that includes the background image. Important to be aware of. The other side effect, probably not as widespread, but it could be kind of a spoiler for some higher difficulty puzzles. A lot of the time, if you have the ability to host your own images on your own servers, you have extra information that you could use to customize the image dynamically. And that now is no longer possible, because what's happening is if you want to host that image elsewhere, or if you want to host that, well, you can't actually now anyway. So I guess to think about it, grandfathered puzzle caches that do that should be fine. I'm getting ahead of myself. So the background images, those won't change because the URL is still there. The thing that I just found out today is that, okay, roll back just a bit. There's so much going on in this head right now. The reasoning, and they've clarified this, the reasoning, which is kind of understandable, is that with all of this privacy stuff that's going on, GDPR, the UK laws, and the California laws that have just been enacted, that they're making all the adjustments, they are now essentially being forced to strip away information that could be relevant to a person by viewing an off-site image. So that's one of the reasons why they're not using the background image on an off-site, on an external URL. Because, for example, if I use that image on my server, then your browser is directly requesting that image from my server. So I can keep track of that request, that IP that it came from, where you are in the internet, basically. It's not crazy detailed like you are at this house necessarily, but it's just kind of internet information. And that kind of information is what a lot of this privacy concern is trying to make safe. So they're now not allowing these background images to be hosted on a site that could potentially track fairly standard internet user information, like browser information, I should say. So there's some spots where I am leaning back and talking quiet. So I will try to keep volume up. So with that said, for the sake of security, they are attempting to move all of their geocache-related media onto their own servers so that they know what's going out, they can strip out that information, and not have third parties potentially record that kind of activity. And I just realized right now that could also affect, counters that people put in their descriptions. And this is the next point that I found out today. They have also extended this logic to geocache listings, HTML. So if you know HTML and you've created listings and you've put an image tag with a source and a value, then you may have hosted those images elsewhere, like say on a public hosting server like PhotoBucket, something like that, or on your own server. Go into your listing and don't edit the listing. Go into the description and check the URL of that image now. It is no longer to your custom server. It has been essentially proxy loaded via one of their servers. So that means any image in your description now that people load on their browser is loading it via their own servers as well. So there's no more image embedding that is directly loading an image from the place that you want it to be loaded from. And that could be very important because I have just had to disable one of my caches where that is extremely significant for the puzzle. So this is kind of an alert for anybody who has that kind of internet technology in their cache listings. You may want to double check to make sure that they still work. And moving forward, be aware that you won't be able to host your background images on your own server. You'll need to upload them. That in itself isn't a huge deal. But again, the issue is EXIF data is removed on the upload. And if you do rely on things like IP address or browser agent or something like that to determine, say, a puzzle content or what you're displaying to a user, that is also no longer going to work because your server is always going to be getting the request from their proxy server because their proxy server downloads the image and then sends it to the person who wants to view it on their browser. I'm hoping I'm not going too fast or too technical for people. It's kind of a lot to take in from a technical standpoint, which I think is one reason why it's not announced for everybody, because a lot of the time when people don't understand or can't grasp something, especially people who aren't as tech savvy, then flags may rise and people may go nuts wondering about that. So that's just my discovery that I'm sharing with you, just to be aware of as cache owners moving forward from now. I don't know if it was a mistake or not, but they have explained that as their reasoning. the security issue. And so it doesn't sound like they're going to re-add the background image URL. And the embedded image in the descriptions has already been implemented, because I just tested it out like 2 hours ago, and yeah, all those images are now hosted. The image source. So on the back end, what happens is when you save a description in HTML, their servers will take that code, parse it, and then that's how they determine what is allowed and what not allowed. So now they've also decided to parse to read that image source, which means that when you save a description HTML, they are requesting that image that you have put in your source, in your HTML source, and creating a copy on their proxy. So that's pretty much how that process is now working. So as a cache finder, not totally relevant, but there's a couple of puzzling tips. But as a cache owner, those are a few things that are very relevant. On to kind of another minor update that you may have noticed, maybe not. It's fairly minor, but this has to do with bookmark lists. So if you remember, they rolled out the new lists recently, and I think it was last week, somebody noticed that the page where, the old page where, when you add a cache to a bookmark list, you have the option to put in a custom title, a description, all that stuff on its own page. When they rolled out the new lists, they kept that page available. So if you're viewing a list, I have the list, I have a cache open, so I should use that. Yes, so if we're looking at a list, or a cache here, this add to list button, that used to be a link which which took you to the page to add the item to a bookmark list. When they rolled out the new lists, they made it so that if you click on it, it pops up with the new list box, and you can do that. However, originally they kept this as a link, so that if you right click or middle click, you can open that link into a new tab, which allowed you to use the old add to list form, which included the title, description, all that stuff. That is no longer a link. So if you notice, middle button will no longer do it. Right click, there's no open in a new tab. It is no longer a link, which means they have removed that page entirely, and now we're basically being forced to use this add to list field pop-up. The other option obviously is go directly to the bookmark list that you want to add it to, and manually add the GC code that you want to add. So there's still ways around it, but for whatever reason, they decided to remove that old page. Again, don't know if it's going to come back or not, but something to be aware of. It's not a mistake. It's not something weird going on with your browser. It's not a bug. It actually is no longer a link. The page is not there. Okay, what else do we got? Okay, so one other thing, I've seen a lot of people mention, whether it's on in the forums or on Facebook groups, people have wondered why some buttons aren't working, or they're taking too long, or the page doesn't seem to be working. It's kind of sluggish now. What happened was, if you remember what I mentioned earlier about that pop-up with the cookies where you've got to approve or look at more details about it, that they're using another website, another provider to handle that code. And on the back end, I don't know the details of it because it's very, very technical, but it seems that's what is happening is this service is slowing down the loading of additional scripts throughout the website. So one of the things that I've kind of figured a workaround, at least in Firefox, because I have Grease Monkey installed, so I can set up my own scripts. The listing would load, everything would be visually there, but buttons would not work. And for example, if I was editing my cache coordinates, the actual action to intercept that, to make this pop up, was not loaded right away. So this, being a link, actually just refreshed the page. And it took forever, it seemed, for this to actually work. There was no way, no indication that the scripts had loaded. So if it seems like you're coming to a page and a button isn't doing what it should be doing, or is just not doing anything at all, wait 5 to 10 seconds. Hopefully this gets fixed very soon. But if you just give it a few more seconds, let it sit for a bit, eventually the functionality will be there, and then it will work. The same thing happened with the personal cache note. It wouldn't happen right away. Using even add to list, some of these buttons, the interactions weren't loaded right away, and so they would do weird things. And so something to be aware of, because there's a whole lot of people who don't know what's going on. And hopefully Groundspeak HQ, you're working on it, because I know I can rant about things a lot, but yeah. So those are the main things that I wanted to cover. Primarily that the background image and the change to proxying all the images that you load in a cache listing. So even with this, this is a kind of a fairly image heavy. If you notice this, let me get this. The image address is now imageproxy.geocaching.com, whereas the original code, the source. See if I can get this quickly. The image itself is hosted on gccachealign.net. So the source code shows the external located image, but as soon as you save it, it sanitizes it, changes the URL to their own proxy server. So something you should be aware of. What else? I think that was about it. So that was the major one. Background image, embedded image, and the cookie pop-ups, the slowness of the web pages. Give it a few seconds. It'll eventually work. And the bookmark link that is no longer a link for adding to a list. That pretty much covers it. So similar along the lines to these images, remember how I mentioned that image uploads to the gallery via logs that are posted to a cache, or images that you upload yourself via upload images to your gallery. Those will all, again, be uploaded to the proxy server. So older caches, you might notice the source code of the image, or the source domain for the image, was image.geocaching.com / something. We used to be able to do that. Now, it doesn't break. They just know that that particular URL will redirect to the Amazon Web Services URL. So that's not something to be aware of. Older caches may still have that old URL, but the image is now actually hosted on Amazon Web Services. It seems kind of complicated, the back-end stuff. But that is something that I just think was really important to make sure it was out there, so that people kind of understood. And I hope I elucidated the mechanics of it a little better. I'll add some more to the description, some more information, and if there are any changes or updates, I'll add that to the description as well. I'll change the name of the video to updated, because you can't edit the video, so I'll make sure that that if there's any changes or updates, that'll be reflected in this video. Yes, Cache Canada, my images work. The images will work. Though I don't believe that anything that they've done will break image displays. So you might not notice anything. If you were to view old listings, new listings, the images will still work. But it's more about the fact that by uploading to their servers, the EXIF data is being stripped, because that can contain personal information as well, which is against all of the agreements, the privacy concerns. And it also disallows us to use HTTP or HTML requests, like browser request information, like the IP source, the browser, like all that technical stuff. That stuff we can't use, but the images themselves should still display properly. Hoping that they don't re-render the images, size them, and change the quality, all that stuff. It doesn't look like that's happening either, so it should ideally be the same raw image that you intended. PNGs are still PNGs, JPEGs are still JPEGs, GIFs are still GIFs. It looks like it's really just that metadata, whether it's EXIF data or the requests for the images from the user directly. So Roger, what if the changes on your server, do they reload it? That is a good question. Haven't tried that yet. I would assume that, I would assume that it's not doing a proxy load every time the description is loaded. I would think and hope at least every time you save the listing, it would have to recheck those images in your HTML source. So that might update the image. But if you're doing any kind of dynamic loading whenever the image is requested, that's not going to happen. It doesn't look like. Or at least it'll be coming as if the request is from their server, not the user. Yeah, kind of going back to what happened with those other third-party image hosting providers. That's not so much the same sort of thing. That's basically, I mean, that's like having your own website that you host an image on and your website goes down. What's going to happen to the image? What happened was with those providers, I think they realized that they had a whole lot of traffic using these images daily and they weren't getting anything from it. So they decided to make it so that external requests for the images, as in not viewing the images on their website, would be restricted. So if you embedded like an image source in your description that was on one of those providers, then they tended to just display image restricted or some other image that wasn't what you wanted, because they wanted you to view the image on their website so that they could throw advertising on there and make some funding and stuff like that. So that's kind of a slightly different issue. That's one of the reasons why we want to host our own images, because at least we know then if you host the image on your own server, you have control over it. If it's on a third-party social sharing provider, if that website goes down, then you have nothing. It's gone. It's going to be a broken link or a replacement image, something like that. If you do it on your own server, at least you know and you have got control. So that's kind of the difference. Now, it's not even on your own server. It's everything on Groundspeak, controlled by Groundspeak, which from a security standpoint makes sense, but from a puzzling standpoint, from a control of, from wanting to control the content of what you're providing, that's no longer going to work as well as it did. So I think that pretty much covers it. If there's any questions in the chat, I will try to address those in a comment after I scan through it, in a comment or in the description. Again, I'll update the description with anything else that comes along. And I think that covers it. I don't think there's anything else. Yeah. And if you're ever wondering what or where to go to find this kind of information, check the forums. If you've got a thick skin, watch for the release note update threads. They tend to describe in a little more detail some of the updates that they roll out that don't get put into the newsletters. And obviously they don't always go into full detail like this rollout change with the images. But that tends to come out in discussions and comments afterwards. But I say thick skin because it can get tense sometimes when people have disagreements. So, do as you will. But yeah, on that note, I gotta go find a cache, and it's 2.5 hours till midnight, and I gotta get it today. So, thank you for tuning in. If you have any comments, or questions, post in a comment below, and I'll make sure to answer it, work on it, search, research, whatever, because this is a community, and we want to help each other. So, if you have any other insight as well, please do comment. We want to know, we want to learn, and hopefully Groundspeak will listen to the masses. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, again, on that note, as always, happy caching and excellent adventuring. Blah! Let's see if I can do this without letting go.